Hey, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at the Green Film Festival San Francisco. Thanks for joining us. As you know, we try to bring some of the most interesting, dynamic, and irreverent films from around the world um, to here in the Bay Area. And you're lucky enough to have just seen Cowboy Poets, and we have the director here, Mike Day. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me and show film.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a really cool film to watch. What was the kind of genesis of the film in the sense that what new made you know that there was kind of a film in the making there?
I just realized it started in San Francisco. I was driving from San Francisco to Utah, and I stopped in Elko, Nevada halfway. And I saw a sign, well, not a sign, a poster for the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering, and I thought, wow, what is that? And for a year, it kind of scratched in my head, when those kernels kind of stay there, then after a while you have to listen to it. And so I started Googling it and researching and found that a lot of the poems are actually very environmental, as you'll know. Um, and so that intrigued me even more. And then there was an election in 2016 for the week before I started filming. And so the kind of discussion of environmental truths and who to listen to was very pertinent to me as an outsider, seeing dismay at things that should be common sense being put into one camp or the other politically. Like, you know, there were objective scientific facts about things that are somehow true or not, depending which party you voted for, which was insane. And so I wanted to try and amplify the voice of these people who looked like Republicans to a lot of people, and I hoped would be listened to by an audience that really, needed to find the right people to trust. And I didn't want to make an environmental film really that I don't want to exclude audiences, but it was interesting for me to reach an audience that may have been of the political persuasion that would be doubtful of these things, rather than being in the echo chamber as had been such a problem. So this was that.
And what would you say, in the sense that, I think often when people think about, cowboys or ranchers or, kind of this kind of lifestyle, often people think of like kind of traditionalism. And so where do you, through the course of making the film, where did you see this kind of intersection of like traditionalism and environmentalism, I guess, in the sense that, like, in some ways, cowboys and ranchers and things, at least for many of them, you would imagine, were environmentalists by nature very early on. So, like, where did you see that kind of intersection, and how did people kind of express themselves in that way?
Well, obviously, there's a full political spectrum within that community as well. There is a stewardship, but of course, there are various people throughout history who've had a stewardship of the land who have also destroyed it and driven animals into extinction. So that it's not that that is a perfect equation in of itself. I think in the case of, say, Wally McRae, he was, you could see the cows dying and the water was tested and it was poisonous. So that it's not a matter of subjectivity in those ones. And so that fight, that's been, his life's battle, that fight. And, that coal mine has closed now. And it wasn't because of that battle. It doesn't really care about those matters. It was more geopolitical and the fact that no one's going to be exporting coal to China from America at the moment. So the battle, for me, in many ways, the tradition of the cowboys is fascinating, but it's also quite new to me in some ways because Wally's grandfather came from Scotland. It's only it's three generations, maybe four generations, because he is like a grandfather himself, but
Yeah.
or they're that age, and so yeah, it's quite recent history to me. The whole genesis of the West is new, and it's a place of fresh starts, and uh, that's one of the fascinating things as an outsider looking at it too.
and how did you come across some of the people that you decided to profile? I mean, often in the documentary filmmaking community, we discuss, like relationship building. I mean, were most of these folks, wanting to kind of share their stories? Was there any reluctance, I guess, in the sense of, what was that kind of? How did you develop these relationships and also just storytelling style?
Um, well, being Scottish helped at the time of being right after the election, because first that was sort of perceived that I wasn't on a political spectrum somehow, just because I was not from America. But so that was useful. And they are performers, most of them. I mean, one way or another, to some extent or not. They're used to be on stage, and that comes with its own challenges, of course, as well. I mean, Wally has been on television and on media his whole life, as I mean, most of them have. Obviously, the younger ones, and Mary also is quite new to that world, so they hadn't done as much. That it was more of a challenge than anything else, because we're also not doing something that they're used to a camera crew doing. So
Hmm.
it's and I wouldn't say there was a successful unlearning in that as well either. You can't really undo 40 years of having cameras put in your face. So
Right.
um, yeah, it was an unusual one for me in that respect. But I mean, it's wonderful when you're filming people getting on with what they're getting on with. I mean, obviously when they're on the stage, they're not affected by us being there. There's probably about 10 cameras in the audience, but when people are working in the land, they're doing what they do. People, it's the best thing from a documentarian perspective, maybe in terms of getting people just to, because they can't not do what they have to do when they're doing that. So it's shooting fish in a barrel in a way.
And it's this interesting intersection of tradition and then kind of evolution that we see. I mean, like, if with most of these, I mean, folks, I mean, where do they say things being, a couple decades from now, in the sense that, I mean, will this gathering continue to exist, or do they, or, just even with the nature of like climate change in the world, I mean, are there things that, um, like if they were forecasting things a couple decades from now, is like, what do you think their hopes would be?
Well, one of the things that was kind of shocking to me in a way is that so many of these ranches exist because of tax breaks for billionaires. The land, when it's designated agricultural, is a huge saving for tax. So people have like 200 cows, which is not really, a massive commercial operation by any standards, but it means they have a different tax bracket. So if the tax laws change, then a lot of those guys will be out of work. I mean, the big fear was that the older guys who were doing it did it because they'd go off around the campfire for 2 weeks and they'd have nothing to do. They'd be bored. They would say they were bored, so they'd sit and write poetry, and then they'd hide it. And then it sort of discovered that they were doing it, so they got together and started sharing it. And the generation now have iPads and internet connection, and a lot of the ranches there's not good signal, but a lot there are, and also there aren't as many people working on the ranches usually. Now you can see in the film there's a couple working on a whole ranch, whereas there used to be like more hands and things. So there
Hmm.
are just less people doing it, but you're also less isolated. So when you see Dylan and the young guys coming up and doing it, they're that's that passion to create and gather and share still exists as a kind of core human feature, and that was one of the things as a second film that attracted me to it too, to explore our need to do that, because it's much the same they're doing as what we do as filmmakers. And this year's gathering, I mean, the older generation they're passing away every year. There's like multiple poets passing away sadly. So the fear was what new blood would come through, and would it sustain audiences, because the older guys were the famous guys who were on NPR in the 80s and on TV shows and chat shows and all the rest of it. And they are still growing. They're still getting their audience, and this year is a bit of a test for that for them. And there seems to be good audience support for new blood coming through. So that's giving hope, I think.
And can you remind me? I forgot to look this up actually, but what are the dates for the next festival? If folks decide to kind of jump jump.
Um, it's basically like the last weekend of January. I haven't seen the exact dates, but it's always like right at the end of January, the beginning of February. It kind of overlap. It depends when the weekend falls, but it's that last weekend.
Okay, very nice. And I always try to kind of remind people that we're the kind of grassroots street team for films like yours, and we really appreciate filmmakers um, sharing their films with us. So, what's the ways that we can kind of continue to follow your work, Mike? But then also, uh, if people want to kind of dig into some of the writers in the film, what are ways that they might be able to kind of access and continue that exploration?
I mean, probably for accessing their poems, the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering website is they've got a lot of archive and things have digitized. For me, I'm on Instagram as Mike.day. It's a very uneventful one. There's also Intrepid Cinema on Facebook, which is my company, where we kind of post things like that. And intrepidcinema.com is our production company. So please do find and follow us there, I suppose.
Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Mike. Is there anything else that you want folks to kind of think about the film when they kind of leave the theater? Grab a drink down the street and have the conversation.
Well, I hope it resonates. I think it's better on a second watching, so I'd advise everyone to go back with their friends to the next screening. So,
Well, very nice. It's a very special film, and thank you again for sharing it with us, Mike.
thank you so much. Thank you for screening it there.
Most definitely.